come in private jets. Big money. Woo! Go pay una say they give me this car. You don't come or boju anybody, Joe.
An influencer and celebrity, Hushpuppi had it all. He toured around the world in a Ferrari, sported luxury watches, wore expensive outfits, and had over 2 million followers who adored him online. So it's no surprise that he was the self-acclaimed billionaire Gucci master. He had a love for luxury that most people had never seen before, and most importantly, he loved to show it off 365 days a year. However, beneath the charade of a real estate mogul, Hushpuppi was involved in something darker. Something that would eventually earn him a place in a federal American prison. It's not sufficient to just discuss Hushpuppi's downfall without actually knowing the man himself. So, let's go back to the beginning. Born Ramon Abbas, Hushpuppi was raised on the streets of Oworoshoki, Lagos, which wasn't a particularly rich area of Lagos. His mom sold bread while his father drove a taxi. Simply put, Ramon's background was as humble as it gets. Despite being from a poor neighborhood, he always had an eye for the more glamorous things of life. Living within miles of Lagos Island was a huge contributor to that because while Oworoshoki wasn't a particularly rich area, it was situated close to the island. Close enough for Ramon to see the kind of wealth that he wanted for himself. Coming from such a poor background, Ramon knew it was going to be one of two things if he was ever going to be as rich as he wanted. Either he got a respectable job or he looked to a more unorthodox way of making money. And with the popularization of the internet in Nigeria in the 2010s, a unique opportunity appeared for Ramon in the form of online scams. Ramon started with the more popular romance scams at the time, creating fake identities that helped him establish relationships with people online and then request some money. While that offered him some sort of financial rewards, it was nothing more than a couple $100s at best. If he was ever going to get the kind of life he dreamed of, he would have to step up his game. Sometime in 2014, he realized that too, and that's when he decided to move to Malaysia. Moving to Malaysia changed everything for him. On one hand, the type of scams he did gradually changed from mere romance scams to more sophisticated scams like check cashing scams and business email compromise scams. This meant that he was making a whole lot of money, and soon enough he was able to afford all kinds of things: luxury cars, clothes, and even watches. Ramon had everything he could have dreamed of. But you see, Ramon had one problem. He just couldn't shut up about his wealth, and this would eventually come back to haunt him. In the meantime, Ramon was making a lot of money with his business email scams, and you're probably wondering how. You see, unlike regular scams, business email compromise targeted large companies, therefore typically involved a lot of money. The idea with this type of scam was simple: gain access to the email of some big company or a high-ranking employee in that company. And from there, the magic happened. All that's left is to wait for the next big payment, and then the scammers will route such money to a different account, usually one they control. It probably isn't as straightforward, but you kind of get the idea. Gradually, Ramon raked in millions of dollars over the next couple of years, getting better and even bolder at the type of companies he was targeting. But you know what else he got better at? His online presence. Unlike many other people in his line of work, Ramon wasn't chill about how much he was making. In fact, he loved to let people know just how much money he had. What started as nothing more than a couple of photos of expensive items soon turned into daily uploads of expensive items, but this time with a catch. Ramon had started putting himself out there as some sort of grass to grace story, a motivational figure for young people to look up to. His post has started to extend beyond some rich guy with a taste for the glamorous things of life. In time, he even got himself a nickname. That's right, it was the birth of Hushpuppi. But trust me, it's here that things get really interesting. Naturally, when you have someone who makes money the way Hushpuppi did, they tend to live quite under the radar. But Hushpuppi wasn't worried about any radar. He wanted to be known, to be seen, to hold some kind of influence in the real world. His post, which seemed to be nothing more than a rich guy with an obsession, achieved the aim he wanted. It got people talking about him. Everyone started to go, "Who's this guy? What's his deal? How does he make so much money? Between his 2 million naira shoe purchases and his 15 million naira vintage bag acquisition, Hushpuppi let the entire world know there was a baller in town, particularly in Nigeria. And by March 2017, he made his first big play in Nigeria, involving music artist Davido. It all started with Hushpuppi spending 11.5 million naira in Quilox in one night, followed by an early morning rant on Instagram the next day with the hashtag Babaolowo himself. While this looks like some innocent post at first, the fact that Davido was popularly referred to as Omo Babaolowo showed what Hushpuppi was trying to prove. Unlike Davido, he was self-made. He then proceeded to Snapchat to make things clearer, even going as far as suggesting a spending competition with Davido. But just like Hushpuppi, Davido was a bit of a show-off himself, and he didn't take that nicely. He came for Hushpuppi as hard as he could, but Hushpuppi's goal had been accomplished. Now, everyone was wondering which strange guy had the guts to challenge Davido that way. Hushpuppi was now getting the attention he wanted, and if you think it stopped there, think again, because this guy wasn't slowing down anytime soon. Surprisingly, he made up with Davido a few days later and even took pictures with him. But what seemed like a one-time thing soon became more than that, because barely 3 months later, Hushpuppi got into another huge fight. This time, 2 other musicians were involved, Phyno and Ice Prince. And it all started after Hushpuppi compared them wearing fake Patek watches to people pirating their work. This got Phyno absolutely furious enough to go in on Hushpuppi guns blazing. He talked about how Hushpuppi didn't represent anything beyond designer products, and another musician, Casey, even questioned the nature of his occupation. Now, at the time, Hushpuppi didn't particularly advertise what he did. I mean, that probably gets him a bed space in prison. But what Phyno didn't know was that he was giving Hushpuppi exactly what he wanted. In the meantime, his social media never stopped buzzing with photos of him regularly in luxurious items. And on some occasions, he would include some advice to people out there. If you'd listened to him back then, you would probably have thought this guy was doing some legit work. The more you expand your dream, and I want to look out. Oh, yes. His social media presence brought him into the spotlight, but you see, the thing about the spotlight is that with it comes bigger scrutiny. Hushpuppi gradually became the subject of various online discussions, with people wondering what this guy was into that made him so rich. There were rumors that he was into a real estate agent, but nobody knew what he was really involved in until Hushpuppi slipped up. You see, when it comes to social media, it's a two-way street. You can get all the attention you want, or you could get found out. And Hushpuppi was about to get found out. In his usual fashion, Hushpuppi uploaded something to get people talking. This time, it wasn't a picture of him or any of his luxury items. Instead, it was a screenshot of a 300,000 naira credit alert from one of his rich friends. But there was something unusual about the screenshot. Something that gave people a glimpse into what Hushpuppi was really doing. The screenshot showed that the bank account was registered to a suspicious email address, jwoodscreen@yahoo.com. Online investigators did their thing and linked the email address to a Facebook account, Jane Woodscreen. The account had just a few pictures with the usual privacy feature thingy that Yahoo boys usually have turned on. Whether people believed he was into fraud or not, one thing was clear. Hushpuppi was no Jane Woodscreen, and the email clearly showed that there was something about Hushpuppi. But this wouldn't be the first time he would slip up. In fact, as we would see later in this story, Hushpuppi was usually his own nemesis. The Yahoo Boy rumors started to pop up everywhere, but Hushpuppi continually dismissed them as the murmurings of haters. And the thing about publicity is, good or bad, it's still publicity. And Hushpuppi was getting a whole lot of that. He gradually became a social media celebrity, an influencer of some sorts, and he began to forge relationships with some really important people. While Hushpuppi's source of income was still a big question, there was no denying the fact that he had become really popular. However, that meant he got constant hate. In 2017, Hushpuppi moved to Dubai, where he would continue his scams on a whole new level. Around this time, he found a good friend in Ismaila Mustafa, popularly known as Momfa. Momfa seemed to live a similar type of lifestyle to Hushpuppi, and the pair hit it off naturally. However, it didn't last long as they soon had a fight of their own, with both of them publicly accusing each other of fraud. It was also here that Hushpuppi truly lived the life he'd always wanted and showed off to his over 2 million followers on Instagram. His Instagram posts had him smiling in front of his Ferraris or Rolls Royce covered with the Louis Vuitton duvet or the private jet, or exiting designer stores with a couple of robe handbags, and with it were the usual hashtags Fendi, Gucci, Louis Vuitton. His looks seemed to exude a kind of extravagance many had not seen before, but then extravagance was his brand. His Dubai residence was a penthouse at the Palazzo Versace with a private pool and hot tub on his lanai. That penthouse cost him nearly $500,000 every year, and it should be where Hushpuppi lived up until his arrest in June 2020. While Hushpuppi was by no means an influencer or celebrity, he actually managed to become both of these things while pretending to be a celebrity. He started getting invitations by top fashion brands to fashion shows, and sometimes even got birthday gifts from some of the biggest brands out there. But really, it wasn't the first time he was getting recognized by a huge brand. Back in January 2015, Hushpuppi received a gift from the Versace store in Kuala Lumpur as their best customer of 2014. But while Hushpuppi was living the kind of life he wanted, showing off his wealth every day, his posts were starting to attract attention. And not the type he wanted, law enforcement were starting to take a look at him with a more keen eye. Two agencies that took a particularly keen interest in Hushpuppi were Interpol and the FBI. He popped up on the FBI's radar after one of his associates was apprehended in connection with a fraud operation on October 15, 2019. The operation involved one of Abbas' U.S. bank accounts receiving a wire transfer of $922,857.56. Money that was meant to be a payment by a New York law firm to one of its clients, intercepted by Hushpuppi and his cohorts. This was a typical business email compromise scam in play. Since it usually involved huge sums of money, Hushpuppi typically enlisted the services of certain people to help move the money around, making it harder for law enforcement to keep track. One of such people was a Canadian-American, Galeb Alaumari, to whom Hushpuppi sent a third of the money received on October 15. But before Alaumari could get the money to Hushpuppi through their usual channels, he was arrested 2 days later by the FBI. Over the course of the investigation into Alaumari, the FBI uncovered a large ring of fraudsters with Hushpuppi at the center of it, pulling the strings. They pulled off several business email compromise scams that typically involved the hacking of a company or an individual's email through social engineering tactics like phishing or just good old password guessing. Once they're in, they begin to monitor the email for any payments or invoices. When they discover an invoice, that's when the real magic begins. Usually, it involves changing the payment details on an invoice to their own details, either by sending updated account details through the recipient's email address or using an email address that looks similar to the recipient's own. BEC scams were usually large-scale, and as such, involved a network of usually connected players. First, we have the hackers, who are experts at getting into various emails. Then, the money mules, who are often people with no knowledge of the scam, mostly magas tricked into opening accounts through romance scams. Then the loaders or money launderers, who control accounts that are used to move large sums of money around the world. As was usually the case, many of these transactions were in the millions of dollars. While it may seem almost unbelievable that someone in a corporate office would send such huge amounts of money without confirmation, it happened countless times. With a huge increase in income, Hushpuppi showed off even more. He bought cars, clothes, and even watches, particularly his $230,000 Richard Mille watch, and his posts seemed to shift to more motivational quotes. Basically, what Hushpuppi was trying to do was to paint himself as some sort of self-made man and then use that to motivate young people that they could be like him if only they worked hard. Surprisingly, most people actually believed him. And it wasn't just poor people. Even some already established wealthy individuals were starting to actually rate him. He began to associate himself more with people of influence, including pop stars like Davido and Wizkid, politicians like Dino Melaye, and even top football players like Chelsea's Tammy Abraham. He had it all: money, fame, influence. But the one thing he didn't know was that law enforcement agents had started watching his every move. As the investigation into Alaumari continued, the FBI began to dig up any information on Hushpuppi, and Hushpuppi's social media posts made their work a lot easier. One of such posts was a photo of his birthday cake, a gift from Fendi, in his typical "look at all this stuff I bought" pose on October 12, 2018. That post was soon uncovered by investigators who used it to find out his date of birth to track him to a visa application. From there, they were able to understand what Hushpuppi did for a living. But before they could bring him in, they had to watch him for a while until they had something concrete. As they watched and waited, the FBI discovered many business email compromise scams, including one in January 2019 that involved millions of dollars from a Maltese bank. Hushpuppi and Alaumari had planned to make use of several accounts to launder about $20 million from the bank into private accounts controlled by the two of them. The plan involved them posing as stock regulators to allow them gain access to the bank's secure payment system and then send huge amounts of money to the planned accounts. What's interesting in this entire scheme is that both men didn't seem to care about being discreet, as they communicated with their personal Snapchat accounts. In April of the same year, Alaumari informed Hushpuppi of a big sum of money coming in, $300 million from an unnamed Premier League club. The plan, which involved the use of a Mexican bank account, was soon scrapped after Alaumari discovered that the UK banks wouldn't pay into the accounts in Mexico. Seeing the arrest of Alaumari by the FBI and the subsequent arrest of Monfa a few weeks later, it was common sense for Hushpuppi to disappear, go off the grid, or at least reduce his social media activity, knowing he was next. However, he had other ideas, simply choosing to change his Instagram bio from billionaire Gucci master to real estate mogul. But the FBI weren't buying that. They continued to look into him, carefully observing his everyday movements and gathering incriminating evidence against him. For Hushpuppi, it was business as usual. He kept posting his usual content while the world dealt with a pandemic. Unknown to him, an invisible enemy was watching and gradually closing in on him. The FBI, with the help of Dubai authorities, kept Hushpuppi under close surveillance, and it was only a matter of time before they got to him. Shortly after midnight on Monday, June 8, 2020, Hushpuppi was woken from his sleep by a loud noise at the front door, and within seconds, a huge number of armed men were in the apartment. What initially seemed like Hushpuppi was being robbed soon turned out to be the Dubai police SWAT team, who were there to arrest him and 11 others in a series of simultaneous raids dubbed Operation Fox Hunt 2. The police confiscated 47 smartphones, 21 laptops, around $7 million worth of luxury cars, $40 million in cash, and the addresses of millions of his victims. Among all the suspects arrested, only Hushpuppi and Ponley, popularly known as Mr. Woodbury, were of particular interest to the FBI. The two were sent on a plane to the US, where they were set to face serious criminal charges. Realizing how bad the situation was, Hushpuppi hired criminal defense attorney Luis Shapiro, who had a great deal of experience with similar cases. Luis Shapiro filed a motion to move the trial date to allow him time to conduct his due diligence and build a strong defense for his client, a motion that was granted by the court. But soon enough, Shapiro realized the FBI had an airtight case against Hushpuppi, and perhaps the only way he could help his client was to negotiate a plea deal. Hushpuppi pleaded guilty to conspiracy to engage in money laundering, an offense that attracts the maximum sentence of 20 years.
A Nigerian Instagram influencer who posted pictures of his lavish lifestyle could spend the next 20 years in a prison cell. Ramon Abbas, aka Hushpuppi, has pleaded guilty to money laundering in a U.S. federal court.
The plea deal involved a clause that stated that Hushpuppi would be required to return all the money he had gotten through illicit means to the real owners. With Hushpuppi accepting the plea deal, his trial began on July 7, 2021. The prosecution detailed Ramon Abbas' role in defrauding so many people between January 2019 and June 2020, including the defrauding of a Qatari businessman of about $180,000. According to the prosecution, Abbas was involved in a large crime syndicate that was responsible for laundering millions of dollars. The syndicate included suspended Deputy Commissioner of Police Abba Kyari and 5 other co-conspirators. Because he had already taken a plea deal, Hushpuppi didn't mount much of a defense in court, with most of his defense being centered around how he was a good partner and father to his 3 kids. That's right, Hushpuppi had children, 3 of them in fact, and for different women, but he had always supported his children as much as he could, even though they weren't living with him, a point that his lawyer made sure to bring up in the proceedings. His sentencing was set for November 7, 2022, but before that, a team of U.S. attorneys led by Stephanie Christensen tried to screw him by recommending the court sentence him to 135 months in prison. His lawyer quickly moved to his defense, citing the plea deal Hushpuppi agreed to and his cooperation with law enforcement since his arrest. Then came the verdict.
The United States court has sentenced Hushpuppi to 11 years imprisonment, but he will spend 9 years in prison because he had spent 2 years already in a U.S. prison following his arrest in Dubai in June 2020.
Hushpuppi was sentenced to 11 years at the Federal Correctional Center FCI Fort Dix in New Jersey and decided to make payments of about $1.7 million to 2 of his victims. It was an unbelievable downfall for a man that was once the billionaire Gucci master. And although there are debates as to whether he got what he deserved, one thing remains clear. Hushpuppi wasn't just an ordinary scammer, he was the world's flashiest scammer, with the kind of flashiness that gets you on the radar of law enforcement agencies. Perhaps if he had just hushed, he would still be living large today.